Story 1. The Forgotten House. Sarah, a graphic designer, had always sought a place to escape the fast-paced city life. She stumbled upon an old house at the edge of a dense forest, its exterior charming yet eerie. The creaking wooden floors and vintage wallpaper seemed to whisper stories of the past, and its history intrigued her. Built in the early 1900s, the house had seen tragedies that were now part of its legacy. As night fell on her first day, Sarah settled into her new home with a book. The wind howled outside, and the trees scratched against the windows, casting ominous shadows. She tried to ignore the unsettling feeling creeping up her spine. Suddenly, she heard soft whispers echoing through the hallways, like distant conversations floating through the air. Straining to listen, she was met only with silence and decided it was merely the house settling. The next morning, Sarah woke late and discovered an old, dusty mirror in the attic. Curious, she cleaned it and hung it in her bedroom. That night, she glanced into the mirror, and a wave of unease washed over her. A sensation of being watched crept in, and when she turned to look behind her, there was nothing there. The next few nights, the whispers grew louder, almost pleading, as shadows flitted past the corners of her vision, taunting her. Every time she turned, the air seemed to grow heavier, thick with unseen eyes. On the fourth night, Sarah was jolted awake by the creaking of her bedroom door. Heart racing, she called out, "Hello," but only silence responded. Gathering her courage, she stepped out of bed, peering into the hallway. Just as she reached the door, a shadow darted past her, quick and fleeting. Panic set in, but she couldn't shake the need to confront whatever was haunting her. Determined, Sarah set up a camera in the living room to capture any evidence of the supernatural. The next day, she anxiously reviewed the footage. Her heart dropped as she saw the shadow hovering just outside the frame, watching her. The sensation of being observed intensified, even during the day, as if the house itself was alive and curious about her presence. In search of answers, Sarah ventured to the local library, where she uncovered the tragic story of a child who had vanished in the house decades ago. The family had experienced a series of misfortunes, and whispers of a curse surrounded their tragic fate. As she delved deeper, Sarah learned that the whispers she heard were similar to the ones the family had described, drawing them closer to the darkness that consumed them. Unable to endure the torment any longer, Sarah packed her belongings and decided to leave. On her last night, she felt a chill sweep through the house. As she walked toward the door, a cold breeze whispered, "Stay," brushing against her cheek. With a final glance back, she drove away, the house receding into the distance, a silent guardian of its dark past, forever waiting for its next unsuspecting inhabitant. Story 2. The Haunted Cabin. Tom and his friends, Jake, Leela, and Mark, were excited for their camping trip to a secluded cabin deep in the woods. They packed their gear, ready for a weekend filled with laughter, stories, and the joy of nature. As night fell, they gathered around a campfire, sharing ghost stories and laughter, each tale more chilling than the last. Jake recounted the story of a man who had vanished in the woods, only to return years later, haunted by whispers. Later that night, Tom was jolted awake by a scratching sound outside. Initially dismissing it as an animal, he tried to go back to sleep. However, the scratching intensified, echoing against the wooden walls. Heart racing, he quietly got out of bed and approached the window, peering into the darkness. He saw nothing but shadows shifting among the trees, yet the scratching continued. After several moments, it stopped, replaced by an unnerving silence that pressed in around him. The next day, they decided to explore the surrounding area and stumbled upon a dilapidated shack hidden among the trees. The door creaked ominously as they pushed it open, revealing remnants of a long-abandoned life. Dust-covered furniture, faded family photos, and strange markings on the walls gave the place an eerie presence. A chill enveloped them, and they couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. That night, the whispers began again, creeping through the cabin walls. They started as soft murmurs, but grew into frantic cries, echoing through the air. Tom felt an unsettling chill crawl up his spine. Alone in the dark, he could have sworn he felt cold breath on his neck, turning to find no one there. As panic set in, they decided to sleep in shifts, but sleep evaded them, leaving them restless and on edge. In the early hours of the morning, Tom woke to find his friends gone. Their belongings lay untouched, and a sense of dread filled the cabin. Frantically, he called their names, searching the woods, but only silence answered him. Despair tightened around him as he stumbled back to the shack, feeling drawn back to where it all began. Inside, he discovered a hidden trapdoor leading to a dark basement. As he descended the creaky stairs, the air grew colder, thick with the smell of damp earth. The faint cries intensified, becoming clearer. In the dim light, he saw shadows moving, whispering unintelligibly. His heart raced as he realized the truth. His friends were trapped, their souls entwined in the darkness that consumed them. With no way to escape, Tom felt the chill of despair close in as the shadows danced around him, sealing his fate in the haunted woods. Story 3. The Disappearing Neighbors. In a quiet suburban neighborhood, the Johnson family was known for their friendly gatherings and community spirit. They welcomed the Hargroves, the new neighbors, with open arms, but the Hargroves' response was cold and distant. Initially, the neighborhood believed their reserved nature was due to shyness. However, as weeks passed, the Hargroves rarely left their home, and when they did, they hurriedly made their way to the car, avoiding any social interaction. Soon after, strange occurrences began to unfold. Neighbors reported hearing muffled cries during the night, unsettling whispers that seemed to drift through the darkness. When they checked, the Hargrove house remained dark and silent, its windows like lifeless eyes staring back at them. Mark, a close friend of the Johnsons, grew increasingly uneasy about the oddities surrounding the Hargroves. One evening, he knocked on their door, hoping to offer a friendly hello. After several attempts, he was about to leave when he heard faint cries coming from inside, echoing through the door like a plea for help. Alarmed, he called the Johnsons, and together, they decided to contact the police. When the officers arrived, they knocked on the Hargroves' door, but received no response. Just as they were about to leave, they heard the muffled cries again, clearer this time. They forced the door open, revealing a dusty living room filled with old furniture, the air thick with neglect. One officer noticed a strange sound coming from a slightly ajar basement door. The unsettling noise drew them in, and they cautiously opened it, revealing a dimly lit room. To their horror, they discovered the Hargrove family tied up and disoriented, victims of a man posing as a handyman. They had been held captive for days, drugged and tortured, left in a dark corner of their own home while their captor roamed freely in the neighborhood. As the officers freed the family, the chilling story unfolded. The captor had taken advantage of the Hargroves' reclusive nature, believing that no one would come looking for them. In the aftermath of the rescue, the neighborhood was shaken with fear and disbelief. The once warm community was now cloaked in suspicion, as whispers of distrust echoed through the streets. The Johnsons felt a heavy guilt for not noticing the signs earlier, haunted by the thought that they could have intervened before it was too late. Though the Hargroves were safe, their emotional scars ran deep, and the memories of their ordeal lingered long after the incident. Even after the captor was apprehended, an air of unease settled over the neighborhood. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of leaves felt like a reminder of the darkness that had lurked too close for comfort. Trust eroded among neighbors, leaving them wary of one another, aware that sometimes the most frightening threats hide in plain sight, even among friends.